Welcome into the Moi Ploy, where we are breaking down the Paradox in a Box Fantasy Football League. Up first, we have our Week 3 recap. So let's go ahead and take a look on over there. We've got Gluten Freak and the Corona 19 squared off. Corona 19 came away with the win pretty convincingly. Gluten Freak underperforming yet again. Todd Moy Forever versus All Barkley No Bite. Todd improves to 2-1. All Barkley No Bite falls to 2-1. A decently convincing win, but not definitely not overpowered. Ray had a respectable score, good enough for I think it was the fourth highest score on the week. Next up, we have the Avengers versus the Goat Squad. I'm having to be very quiet because Judah's asleep right now. The Avengers versus the Goat Squad. Goat Squad 0-3, yet another anemic score by their team. The Avengers putting up 203 points. Look at these score lines. You didn't even have a single player that just popped off like crazy. I mean, Keenan Allen 30 is good, but it's not insane. Orange Justice versus If Moy Then Moy. If Moy Then Moy falling to 1-2, and Orange Justice at 2-1-0. Dominating performances by Allen Robinson, Michael Gallup, and Tyler Boyd. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Week 4 matchups. We've got some interesting matchups this week with a 2-1 Todd Moy Forever versus the 0-3 Gluten Freak. Gluten Freak's had one player start. There have been two cancellations now. We have a cancellation on the game for Pittsburgh and Tennessee, and then Patriots and New England. Patriots in New England. The Chiefs in New England has also just been recently postponed. So something interesting there to consider. In our matchup with Todd Moy Forever and Gluten Freak, there's not a ton of people that are getting they're going to have to get benched because of the cancellations, except for on Todd's side. Todd is having to bench. Let's see. Oh. Todd is having to bench both Derrick Henry and Juju Smith-Schuster. So two of his top performers are on the bench this week, which really stinks for him. Let's get back to the scoreboard. Corona 19s versus the Goat Squad. Goat Squad 0-3 really needs a win. Unfortunately, he's up against the unstoppable machine, Corona 19. Yeah, there's not much to say here. The projected point total pretty much says it all. I think they're both starting a couple players that are they need to swap out because their games are being delayed. But yeah, Jerry Jeudy already having a pretty good game. 14 points puts Goat Squad kind of in a hole. All Barkley No Bite versus Orange Justice. This is a very interesting matchup. I think this one is going to be the game of the week. Right here, we have two people trying to stay at the top of the league. Falling to 2-2 really doesn't scare you in this league, especially with some of the terrible starts we've had out of Gluten Freak, If Moy Then Moy, and Goat Squad. You really only need to beat those three and one other team, and you're into the game or into the playoffs. So I think this matchup is going to be really, really interesting to see who ends up coming out at 3-1 and can kind of coast their way. By the way, we're already done with 25% of the season. So if you're not hitting the panic button yet, it's time to start thinking about it. Next week, we're done with 33% of the season. All right, next up, the Avengers versus If Moy Then Moy. This is an interesting game in that If Moy Then Moy started with a terrible roster, like truly terrible. Has made several great trades, including a trade for Melvin Gordon, which has already paid off handsomely. His team could be a real sneaky chance at getting a playoff berth if he's able to stay healthy with his roster. We've got the Avengers. They've been doing strong, the second highest team in the league in scoring. So this matchup is really anybody's game here. Let's move on to let's see. Let's take a look at some of the recent activity. There hasn't been a lot of activity noteworthy this week. There's been no big trades, but if we look back just another week, there is one trade that we did not get to mention on last week's trade talk. So right now we have the art of the steal. This is where we break down the trades in the league. So in this week's art of the steal, we have Gluten Freak and the Goat Squad. and they have decided to swap Jared Goff for Tom Brady and Deebo Samuel for Devontae Parker. Now, here's the trade-off. Deebo Samuel is projected to have a better season than Devontae Parker, but Deebo Samuel's quarterback was injured. Gluten Freak forgot to cancel this trade, and so when he saw that the quarterback got injured for Deebo Samuel, so he basically gives away Jared Goff, who just had a fantastic performance, and Devontae Parker for an injured Deebo Samuel and Tom Brady, who has most of his weapons injured. I think this is truly a winning. Both these teams need to win now, and I think the team that made the move to win now is the Goat Squad. So I'm going to have to give the win and the steal to the Goat Squad on this one. Um, Other things that we need to look at, let's take a look at the standings, and let's take a look at the points for. So next up, we need to talk about some secondary matrix. So on this week's episode of the Secondary Matrix, we've got a couple of teams that are underperforming and a few teams that are overperforming. Right now, the team that is overperforming yet again is Todd Moy Forever. You see here, he is really not a 2-1 caliber team. He is barely outscoring the 0-3 Gluten Freak. Another team that is the secondary matrix that I think is deceiving is how good this team is right here. If Moy then Moy, they have uh, a very interesting team, a very interesting stat in that their total points scored right here that you see is very deceptive. Uh, because their first week they actually barely put up any points whatsoever. And so this stat is really deflated by their 116 point performance in a season where everyone in this squad in this league is putting up 116 or 160, 170 points every week. So 116, they're just at a 50 point handicap. But if you add that 50 points back under the team, they actually catapult all the way up into third place or into fourth place for scoring, bumping all Barkley no bite out of the top four. So that is a very interesting team to watch right now. Another interesting team, I think, is Gluten Freak. Gluten Freak, for what seems to be the, geez, fourth year in a row, is getting extremely unlucky with his total points against. He is currently leading the total points against by a wide margin. The difference here this year compared to last year is that his total points scored is not in the top half. He is right there, sitting at number 6 overall. Um, Really, and what's really hurt him is injuries. He's lost Kenny Galladay. He's lost AJ Brown. He's lost Christian McCaffrey. He's, just the injuries have just really piled up for Gluten Freak, and he's struggling to get wins. He's losing guys mid-game, so they're only getting one half of a week's worth of points. That happened to his tight end this week. So it just sometimes you just can't catch a break. And I think if you go 0-4, you're going to have to really try and win out if you're going to make these playoffs this year. That's pretty much it for secondary matrix. There's no real notable waiver wires, no notable injury updates that we don't already know about. So that is going to be a wrap for the week 3, week 4 lineups. I think it's really there's 3 or definitely 2 must-win games. I think Gluten Freak and Goat Squad are very much so in a must-win situation. I think Todd Moy Forever, I think he needs a win because I think his team is trending downwards. He has made several questionable moves as far as his drop ads and his trades. He still has a strong lineup when he's able to field Juju Smith-Schuster, but as you'll notice, he's currently fielding Darius Slayton, who has not had a good. So, like, if one person leaves his starting lineup, he's in deep trouble. All the rest of his bench is just, Russell Gage, not really a great play. Nyheim Hines, situational matchup dependent. Keelan Cole, not reliable starter. Cole Beasley depends. He's the third string wide receiver on a team that is passing more than they usually do, but still is not considered an elite passing offense unless your name is Josh Allen, because he's having elite performances, but that's mostly because of his rushing touchdown upside. Well, and he is throwing the crap out of the ball. I'll give credit where credit is. Josh Allen's having a great year. And you can see just his team really lacks depth. He's starting Jerick McKinnon, like because once Kareem Hunt gets injured and something happens to Derrick Henry regarding some COVID, there's no depth right here. And so I think this is a team that could really trend downwards as the year goes on, injuries begin to stack up. But the Moy is not the Moy for no reason. He has always been great at the waiver wire, and he seems to have a sixth sense for knowing when to bail on players. So maybe he'll pull it off, but right now, currently as it stands, his team is looking a little shaky this week and possibly shaky moving into the future. That is it. That is the week 3, week 4 wrap up. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you guys next week.